Well, I am Bill Brobston, 30-year member of CWA tomorrow. And I was hired in the garage after this great man who's a good friend and mentor of mine. I got his job. He retired in '78, January. And the next guy hired in Anderson Garage was myself. So you're looking at two generations of foremen. This is Carl Nolton, who was hired in 1947, correct?
I think that's right.
And worked all the way up through, helped form the unions. Him and Herb and his brother Herb was instrumental in forming the CWA. And Carl's going to give us some insight on where the CWA came from, the organizational start of it, and the history of it a little bit, and what these guys went through to get what we got now.
Well, it's a lot different now than it was back then. In fact, I think you got to be smarter now than you had to be back then. I really think you do, to compete with the company. But we had a rough go of it, because I can remember my brother, he worked on a line gang, and he would get off work and he'd drive clear to Evansville just to pick up one member. And no kidding, he'd drive all night long to pick up one member. And you couldn't even mention the fact that you was talking union, because they'd fire you on the spot. In fact, he worked on a line gang back then. They'd done everything by hand, you know. And right up at the corner of Old High Avenue and 14th Street, they fired the whole crew but him and the truck driver without reason. Man, boss got mad. So there's a reason to have a union. You got to have one. You got to be organized and have a leader. But Herb was such a good lineman, I think he decided he better keep on. You know, there's a lot of things going on. There's a reason we have a union. A lot of young people today, they don't think you need any. You know, they say we don't need a union. They blame all this trouble on the unions. This trouble is not caused by the union. But I said 30 years ago, and I kind of got hollered at a few times at a union meeting. I said, someday we're going to have to change our method of operation completely, and we have. It's all changed now, you know, the way this district's broken up and everything. So I think the union, I said back then that we're going to have to change our way and get into part of the operation of the company some way or other, because we're going to have to take a lot of responsibility that we didn't used to have. They paid us, we spent the money on beer, back to work on Monday, you know. Not that way anymore.
We got to take more ownership.
Actually, we have to take more responsibility. And
we're stockholders now.
Yeah.
More so now than ever. You know, when you were there, you know.
Oh yeah.
We're all stockholders in a 401k plan that the membership, I don't know how much actually has, but I know I got a lot of shares of stock, so I want to see the company do well too. And like you always said, I remember when we come strike time, you always said, guys said, let's bust them, and you said, no, let's don't bust them. We just want our fair share.
That's right.
We don't want to bust them. We want to be profitable too. We just want our fair share.
We want to keep the job and just let them make a profit so we can share part of it.
That's amen to that.
So everybody has to share part of the blame in today's problem. Everybody. Nobody can shirk his duty now. And this is going to be tough. This is a lot tougher than I think people think it is.
What was the '63 strike like?
It was mean. It was tough. Because we all was young and families and paying on houses and cars.
He was out to break you, wasn't he?
Yeah. And they hung on for 8 weeks. And I remember getting a letter from the president of the company. He's asking you to surrender, in other words, you know, come back to work. I rode across the top of it, and I'll never come back to work until we get it settled and send it back to Indianapolis. But that's the way most people felt back then. I mean, they went out there to win, and we stayed 8 weeks. And it got tough, because you had payments to make, groceries to buy, and we done everything. We dig ditches, paint houses, anything to stay afloat. But we wasn't ever going back.
No one crossed, did you?
No one crossed. Oh yeah, there was 2.
What do you think it would have been like to work for the phone company if you wouldn't have had a union?
It would have been awful because actually, you know, when you're going to have a relationship of any kind, you got to be honest with each other. And the telephone company, I can remember back in '53 and back in there, we had some of our contract settlements, and they put out that paper. I don't know if you still get a newsletter or anything.
No, not anymore. We
used to get that, and they'd start before contract time, and it was just all propaganda. I can remember when At&t said they had a poor year and it was going to have an awful hard time in making the budget. They made a bigger profit that year than they'd ever made in history.
Sounds familiar.
That's what they say, see? That's just what they've done. They're still doing that today.
Amen.
Yeah, yep. So I remember that clearly. The biggest profit they ever made in history, and that was the year they were about to go under.
Let me ask you this. You know many retirees. What would it be like if they asked you to start paying more on your insurance as a retiree, and how would that impact you and your retired members?
Well, it'd be tough. You know, I was thinking the other day, if something happened to me, my little pension goes.
Yeah.
You know.
What do you get a month, Carl?
$700.
$700 a month.
707.
707, and he was doing pretty well, and he's not complaining with what he's got. But when we took the last contract, and you started out paying on your prescriptions,
it's got rough.
That hurt. That hurt. First 2 years they were covered, but the last 3, would you tell me your prescriptions run you endorsed around $2,500 a year?
Yeah, I got 2 that I ordered $700 every 3 months. One of them, well, one of them 700, and one of them 400.
And Doris will tell you, and she sat right here and told me, we are in the hospital now because Carl fell and broke his hip 3 weeks ago, but they're not complaining. They're happy with the insurance they have.
Yeah.
Damn happy. It's paid a lot of their bills and taken care of them a lot. You know, it's been a little tough on the prescription part, but the medical part's been great. These are the guys that made this phone company millions of dollars, and they're the ones that made the union strong like it is. If we can't fight for these guys, we're going to be like these guys one of these days. We need to support them 100%. Retiree health care has got to be one of the biggest issues in this contract because we're all going to be retirees someday.
Yeah. You see, with Doris, she got a small pension from the school system, Social Security, and mine total with Social Security and my company pension is $1,600 a month. So we got enough to live pretty comfortable because we got our house and car paid for. That's another thing I might tell some young people too, is I started retiring when I had 10 years service. And I never took a raise. I always put it back in the credit union. When I retired from the telephone company, I was taking home $86 a week. The rest was going into my pension plan. And back then, nobody ever got out before 60 or 65. And I went out, I wasn't quite 52. But I planned for it for 20 years, you know. And that's how I was able to get away from there. Because I had some stock and some bonds. I just cashed some of the payroll bonds in here this last year. But you have to kind of take care of yourself too, you know, and I think a lot of people do. I know Bill does. He got money laying around, and Rockefeller was probably
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Well, you taught me, you and my dad.
Yeah.
Them's the 2 biggest men of my lives, man. They said every time you get a raise, put a little away.
I was about 8, 9 years old. My mother got one of them city service tax tire packing cans, cut a slot in. She said, now you can spend a quarter, but you have to save a quarter. So I started doing that. And when I retired 31 years ago, I was still doing that. And that's how I was able to retire. That's how we could live so comfortable after I did retire. But now it's getting tough. And if they'd take all this away, if they'd take my pension away and all our benefits, we couldn't make it. Even though we've done all that preparation, we couldn't make it. It'd be pretty tough. That's one of the reasons that I'd like to keep kicking, is so Doris has got a paycheck coming in. Because if she lived my pension, she'd have a tough time of it.